Hello and welcome to this episode of our program Arab Affairs. As usual, we will be tackling an Arab affair. Today we'll be tackling two Arab affairs, in fact. So we'll be speaking about Syria, the situation in Aleppo. Of course, as we just learned a few hours ago, that a new deal has been reached to allow evacuation of several besieged enclaves in Syria. That is according to the government and the rebels as well. The agreement, of course, would see rebels who are besieged there coming out of Aleppo, the return of some people to their homes, the evacuation of some others from some areas. However, the situation in Aleppo in itself is very much confusing, as we don't really understand what is going there. Media or Western media just portray the situation as if the regime is bombing the Syrian people heavily, killing the civilians, killing children, killing women. On the other hand, the Russian and the Syrian regime are portraying the situation as they are fighting real enemy, who is the terrorism or the terrorists, and that they are in fight to liberate their own country. This is what we have, or this is both way situation in Syria. That is what we are going to discuss today, the situation in Aleppo, how things are going on, or the developments of the situation in there. What should we be expecting in this upcoming stage? That will be discussed in our show. Later on, we'll be discussing, of course, an important conference that took place in Egypt about Libya. And, of course, this conference concluded just on Wednesday with 5 proposals to end the Libyan crisis. Of course, that was attended by Martin Kobler, who is the UN envoy to Libya. It was also attended by a number of Egyptian officials, but headed by Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry, along with some of the Libyan officials and representatives of the country's numerous factions there. We'll be discussing also that throughout our episode. Before we proceed on with our discussion, let me first have a quick look on the Arab news that took place during this week, and we'll come back for discussion.
Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry met on Thursday with UN envoy to Libya Martin Kobler for talks on the latest developments in Libya. The meeting came after Egypt hosted a 2-day conference on proposals to overcome difficulties facing the implementation of the Shukairat Agreement for settling the conflict in Libya. Upon directives of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, authorities will open the Rafah border crossing with the Palestinian Gaza Strip for 3 days starting on Saturday. The move comes to allow the passage of humanitarian cases, students, and stranded people on both sides of the crossing, and also to allow humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. Residents of a wildcat Jewish settlement in the occupied West Bank rejected on Thursday a proposal to leave voluntarily, raising fears of violence as an evacuation deadline nears. The Amuna outpost, home to some 40 families, is under a high court order to be evacuated by December 25th, since it was found to have been built on private Palestinian land, in a case that has taken on international importance. A spokesman for Amuna residents said they had not been given any notice of when any evacuation could happen. The residents' rejection led to concerns the army would move in immediately to clear them out, leading dozens of youth to stream into the hilltop outpost in windy and bitterly cold weather in the middle of the night. Al-Qaeda in Yemen has labeled the rival Daesh terrorist group deviant and distanced itself from a Daesh-claimed suicide attack in Aden last week that killed dozens of soldiers. Ansar al-Sharia, Al-Qaeda's branch in Yemen, said in a statement it explicitly declared that they were not involved in any way in this operation. The statement stressed that Al-Qaeda has repeatedly said it is determined to fight Americans and their allies while avoiding the shedding of any Muslim blood. The December 10th attack in Aden targeted a crowd of soldiers gathered to collect their monthly payment at a barracks in Al-Shawarqen near the southern city international airport. The attack left 48 soldiers dead and 29 wounded. The UN Cultural Agency called for emergency measures on Thursday to prevent further looting at the historic Iraqi city of Nimrud, which had been wrecked by Daesh militants. Nimrud, founded in the 13th century BC on the Tigris River, about 30 kilometers southeast of Mosul, was retaken by Iraqi forces on November 13th after it was overrun by Daesh in 20. A fact-finding mission sent by the UNESCO agency this week confirmed large-scale systematic destruction and recommended greater protection for what remains of the site. A conference to discuss destruction will take place on February 27th in Paris.
Welcome back, and of course we will start our discussion at once. Let me welcome our guest, Mrs. Suzy Nedi, the Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Al-Ahram Al-Arabi magazine. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you very much. Before we proceed on with our with the situation in Aleppo, because the situation is really confusing, just let me take the latest developments in Syria in this report, and we'll come back for this discussion. Okay. So, the report.
Russia's defense ministry announced that the Syrian army has established control over the districts of eastern Aleppo. The ministry added that Syrian government troops were suppressing isolated areas where rebel fighters continued to resist. Earlier, thousands of civilians and rebels left Aleppo under an evacuation deal that will allow Syria's regime to take full control of the city after years of fighting. The withdrawal began a month to the day after Syrian government forces launched a major offensive to retake all of Aleppo and will hand the regime its biggest victory in more than 5 years of civil war. In a video message to Syrians, President Bashar al-Assad said the liberation of Aleppo was history in the making. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warned that tens of thousands of civilians were still trapped in Aleppo, said action was needed to prevent a Serbian-style massacre. The evacuation were announced on Thursday after an initial plan for civilians and fighters to leave rebel-held parts of the city collapsed the previous day amid renewed clashes. UN envoy Staffan de Mistura told reporters in Paris that around 50,000 people were still trapped in. He added that the rest are fighters, numbering between 1,500 and 5,000 and their families. A first evacuation attempt on Wednesday morning fell apart with artillery exchanges and resumed airstrikes, rocking the city until the early hours of Thursday.
Right, welcome back to you, Mrs. Suzy. And really, we need to understand what is going on in Aleppo.
It's not easy, because different point of views are being said in different kinds of media, actually. From the point of view of Russia and the official Syrian media and other Iranian and other media, it is, as we can say, a battle against terrorism and trying to get back the power of the Syrian government on a piece of the Syrian land, which is Aleppo, of course. On the other hand, of course, you see the American media, the Western media, Saudi media, others are against what's happening, actually, and seeing it as if it is a massacre against the Syrian people. Where is the truth? It is not easy to see, because there is less coverage on the ground there on what's happening, and less listening to the real people who are suffering, who are the Syrians, concerning what's happening there.
There is no independent agency to verify what is really going there.
There are a lot of propaganda being used from different actually sources from the Syrian and the Russian source and from the American point of view. So we can't understand. But what we can understand here is the Russians are putting their hand on Syria very heavily. Of course, they have their own interests. They can't lose Syria. They have their own military base there on Tartus, and they need an ally on the chair of the president of Syria. And of course, the ally is Bashar al-Assad until now. Maybe they can, it's just a card, they can actually get rid of him if he's not of benefit to them after that. So they are fighting their last fight in the Middle East, because if they lose Syria, they will lose a lot. That's why they are losing money. They are losing sometimes soldiers in this battle. It's very important to the Russians to control Syria again. If, on the other hand, the Syrians are paying the price, they don't care. They are losing money, they don't care until now. The Syria may be divided, also they don't care. On the other hand, the Americans have been talking for maybe more than 4 years about combating terrorism, about an ally trying to combat ISIS in Syria and Iraq, and they have done nothing. And they left the ground to the Russians to do their homework, actually, or the international arena homework, unfortunately. What's happening now in Aleppo is a problem concerning humanitarian aids, concerning the future of Syria. But what can we say as Arabs? Nothing, unfortunately. Arabs are divided concerning what's happening in Syria because of different interests, very narrow interests of each country. You'll find Saudis, Qataris have their own interests about not having Bashar al-Assad as a president. You will find other countries who are against the idea. So at the end, the Syrians are paying the price. Now, Aleppo will be finished, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks again. You will find another battle in Idlib, in Tadmir, in different places. But at the end, I think, at the end of the coming year, I think the Syrian problem is going to end by dividing Syria, unfortunately.
Until we get to this point, because I would not want to really jump into this conclusion, or personally, I wouldn't like to announce it from here. But anyway, if we speak about the situation in Syria, and as you said, we'll find many parties now, but many parties who are really having the upper hand. Now we're speaking about Syrian, or the Syrian regime, of course with their allies, the Russians and the Iranians. And on the other hand, we will find the other front, which is the United States, along with all the Western or the European allies, plus, of course, unfortunately, some of the Arab countries. I could really understand the position of the Russians. I can really understand the position of the United States as well. I really don't understand the position of the Arab countries in this particular issue.
Well, we can't just neglect the point that Bashar al-Assad, in an Arab summit, I don't remember, 10 years ago or something, said on air and insulted, actually, some of the Arab leaders, and he said they are half-mans and they are cowards. And this started everything. After that, Syria was accused of killing Hariri, and there were a lot of sanctions around the Syrian regime. And then after the Arab Spring, it started again with Syria and the problems that happened with Bashar al-Assad, that he was so stupid concerning the demonstrations. He fought back very vigorously and aggressively against the demonstrators. So it erupted as a ball of ice coming down. Until we reach actually the very bad situation that we are in now. Some Arab countries actually wanted Bashar al-Assad out. because of personal reasons, because of actually...
Some economic reasons.
Economic reasons, I can't understand this. Saudi Arabia or Qatar, what economic reasons can be done by
the flow
the
of
chaos
some
in
oil
Syria?
through the lands of Syria that
No.
was permitted to some countries and rejected to others?
No, I don't think this could make all of this situation that we reach now and the stubborn concerning what's happened in Syria from Arab point of view. No, I think it's Iran, of course, because, of course, Bashar al-Assad is an ally of Iran, and now Saudi Arabia and Qatar think that Iran is the main enemy, not any other country, but Iran is the main enemy, and this have been erupting all the time 5 years ago or maybe more, so they think Bashar al-Assad have to go out because he is the main ally of Iran. So they are making problems to Syria, of course. This is one of the points. The main point that we should look forward is what's going to happen. Is there a political solution or just a military solution in Syria? That's why I predicted, unfortunately with a pessimistic point of view, that Syria will be divided. Because what I think is in the coming few months, Trump, the new American president, is going to sit with Putin, and they are going to have an agreement concerning what's happening in Syria and in other points, actually. But Syria is one of the main places that they need to speak about, actually. The Americans and the Russians have been speaking about it, a lot of meetings between the foreign ministers, but agreements that wasn't actually really fulfilled. But I think in the coming few months, there will be a real talk about it. And I think my own perspective is that Trump is going to leave Syria for Putin. On the other hand, he needs Putin in other places. So there will be a kind of agreement concerning what's happening in Syria, because I think Russia is not going to leave Syria easily. Which places in Syria that the Russians are very struggling to have it, they are willing to continue the battle that they are doing now and losing more money until they can control all of Syria and give it back to Bashar al-Assad? This I don't think so. They are losing money, so I don't think they are eager about getting back all of the control of Bashar al-Assad's hands on all of Syria. They have certain interests. They don't actually really care about complete Syria again in Bashar's hands. I don't think so. They are eager more about things that is fulfilling their own interests actually in Syria.
Now, we're speaking about an agreement that should be made between both powers, Russia and the United States. We know that Mr. Trump has been flirting with Mr. Putin's in a political way of showing, of course, appreciation to the character, as we have seen all in the campaigns. And yes, we know that this administration seeks to have a kind of relations with the United States that is, rather with Russia, that has been not made by previous administrations, and I'm speaking about administrations, not just the Obama one. What is the role of Iran in this particular issue? And another confusing stance is Turkey. Where does Turkey stand? Of course, we all know that this is very confusing, since we know that Iran, Russia has good relations. At the very end of the last of Obama's term, Iran, U.S. had good relations, but then the Congress extended the 10 years more of sanctions, so we don't really understand what's going on right now between the United States and Iran. Also, Turkey is very much confusing, since it has interests with the NATO. It has interests to get rid of the Kurds, and of course it has its own interests with Saudi Arabia. So, and it is in good relations with Iran as well. So this is the very confusing and complicated situation of both countries here.
No, Turkey situation is not complicated at all. It's very obvious from the first start about 5 years ago of the problems in Syria. Turkey wanted to take some lands in the Syrian land to be under its control. They have taken a lot of refugees, actually Syrian refugees, from starting of the problem, putting them in camps on the borders so that they can, after that, say, we need to get them back and put them in this place, and this place, which is, I don't remember how much kilos, about 50 kilos or something, will be under our control. Of course, they are afraid of the Kurds, so that's why they want to go inside after their borders so that they can actually control the place where some of the Kurds are going, the KBB are going inside Turkey and making some terrorist acts, if we can say so. So Turkey have its own interest against also Bashar al-Assad, because Bashar al-Assad was actually helping Öcalan and others, Kurds leaders, and even giving them houses inside Syria, and Turkey was pushing and pressuring Bashar al-Assad concerning this point. So they have their own revenge and they have their own interests. So that's why from the first point they wanted to get Bashar al-Assad out. And they thought, Erdogan thought at the first starting of this problem in Syria that it will be just going inside and it's very easy to get Bashar al-Assad down and helping the demonstrators and all of that, and it's very easy. Bashar al-Assad will be shaking and he will get down. But unfortunately, this was not the right perspective, because what happened after that is nothing of this, actually. So Turkish after that, even Erdogan 2 weeks ago or something, some days ago, said, few days ago, said, we want to get Bashar al-Assad out. And it was a problem because of this statement between him and between the Russians. The problem with Erdogan is, this was his first point of view, these first actions against Bashar al-Assad all the time for 4 years or maybe more. What happened that changed Erdogan point of view lately? Or Erdogan positions, not point of view, sorry, positions towards what's happening in Syria. What? The coup d'etat. Military coup d'etat against Erdogan shaken him, actually. It made him open eyes towards what the Americans and the NATO wants. He accused openly and frankly the Americans that they were behind this coup d'etat. And that's why he changed his position and he went to have a good relations and good actually talking all the time and negotiating with the Russians. So that made him a bit of changing his positions lately concerning what's happening in Syria. And that's why Erdogan stopped silent concerning what's happening in Aleppo. He didn't talk very insidely or against or taken against actions against what's happening in Aleppo. He left the Syrians and the Iranians to do the homework. This is concerning Erdogan. Concerning Iran, Iran all the time wants to be the key to the Middle East. They want to be the main country in the Middle East, the strongest country in the Middle East. They want to control all of the Gulf countries and maybe more. They are getting all the time with a plan towards this aim. But unfortunately, what's happening on the ground sometimes are hindering them from that. But they have a certain strategy, they don't change it, actually. They are, of course, standing behind Bashar al-Assad all the time. He is their ally. They can't leave him alone. That's why they were all the time with him, even sending some Iranian soldiers to help him in his fight. They are, of course, all the time talking to the Russians, talking to Bashar al-Assad, so that how can they win this battle in Syria. Also, the Iranians are not so concerned about dividing Syria, only if they will be concerned if there is a Kurdish country to come out. And this is the main interest of the Turkish and the Iranians all together, which is preventing a Kurdish country to penetrate the Middle East again, because this will be against their own interests.
That's a point that we really need to raise here, a Kurdish state. Yeah. A Kurdish state, and what does it mean, a Kurdish state that would be built in Syria. And we all know that,
Not
of
only in
course,
Syria. Syria and Iraq, of course.
definitely.
And maybe Turkey and
Yes.
Iran if they can.
Part of each country
Yes.
we're speaking about.
Yes.
We have to speak about the Kurdish because the Kurdish themselves had a very big role to play in Iraq at a certain time, particularly during the invasion.
Yes.
It has now a role to play in Syria, a big role that it is carrying out with, which is the fight against Daesh. And even sometimes they are working hand in hand with the Syrian regime. So a Kurdish state, what does this mean? How would this really threaten the interests of Turkey, of course, Turkey is okay, but we will really come to that, Iran? And how at this point will the Americans and the Europeans who really made their promise to the Kurdish, if they go through this battle with them hand in hand, they would really finish up like a real state? This is the promise, right?
I'm not sure 100% that this was a very strong promise, actually, to the Kurds. Maybe they said, we are going to let you, if you can do it, go ahead. But the point is, the Kurds have their own country, actually, inside Iraq. Kurdistan, actually, you can't, even as an Iraqi, who are not Kurds, go inside Kurdistan without a security permission. Can you believe this? They need something like this in the Syrian land, you know, a place where they can be, you know, have their own identity in it, and they can do as they have done in Iraq. Iraq was a chaos, and then this erupted. They have controlled their own land in Kurdistan, and it's a very rich, actually, place. And you can say that Kurdistan is the only, if I can say so, safe place
in Iraq,
regardless of the green point or the green place,
yes,
or the green zone in Baghdad. But in Kurdistan, it is a real safe place. So they need something like that in Syria, and then maybe after that something like that in Turkey, if there is a chaos also in Turkey, and then they will have their own country.
But would that really instigate a kind of uproar, a kind of disagreement between Iran and Russia from one side, Turkey and the United States, and even Saudi Arabia from the other? I mean, here, how would that matter, particularly due to the relations?
It's interests that talks, actually. Of course, Iran and Turkey and Russia also would not like a Kurdish country, actually, in this part, because they know that if there is a Kurdish country, then it will be pro-American, not pro-Russian or Iran or Turkey. So this is different interests. The Americans, anything that weakens the Arabs, actually, Israel, of course, has its point of view here. Of course, they will sympathize with the Kurds in this because they have the same, if we can say, problems that they had along history. So, of course, any country, Kurdish country, will be their friends, and they will have good interest with them. Israel is a model to another Kurdish country. So I think it's not easy to have this, but the problems that's happening in the Middle East and the chaos that is happening in certain countries in the Middle East actually hint that maybe there will be a possibility of another Kurdish country coming out. The point is, what does this means to the Arabs if there is something like this? Is this to our own interests or not? This needs to be actually seen in a deep way, not just talks easily. It's against us. We have to actually see inside. Will it be on the behalf of the Arab lands only? Then it's against our interests because it will be dividing Iraqi, Syria. Will it be on other countries' lands? Then we should actually see what's going to happen. The point is they want us to pay the Arabs, the Western countries and the United States and the Kurds wants the Arabs to pay for what happened to the Kurds. And this is actually, of course, against our interests, and it's not fair, actually. As we have paid for what happened to the Jewish all over their history. Arabs have paid, Palestinians have paid, and it's not fair. We are not the people who actually massacred the Jewish by millions, actually, or thousands. We didn't do it, but we paid the price for it, unfortunately.
I would really rather not to go through this Jewish issue because I think my opinion would be very much of appreciation to any of the people who are watching us. But anyway, let's speak about the situation and Syria in conclusion. In conclusion, the Syrian situation and what should be, what should we be expecting at this particular upcoming stage? Do the Arab need to realize that the division of two countries as such would not really be in favor of their own national security, of other plans which will be carried out just after this stage is finished? How do you or how do you describe, how do you see read the situation here?
Dividing any Arab country is not in the benefit of any other Arab country, actually, because it will be a model. So it's not easy to accept this. We need to actually stand firm against dividing any Arab country. The point is, on the ground, Iraqi, for instance, is divided on the ground, unfortunately, after the case that happened. Reuniting the Iraqis again is not easy. And also in Syria, there is problems, there is revenge, there is a lot of things. So it hinders any political solution, actually. But the question is, will be a possibility of a political solution in Syria or just a military solution? We'll wait and see, because we're still optimistic about the capability of a political solution to solve the problem in the coming few months. After Trump and Putin will sit together and see what they are going to do, actually. Unfortunately, because the Arabs have no say in this.
In fact, they have, but they are divided in themselves of how they see the matters. Anyway, just we'll really have to wait and see here, but we are turning to another important file, regional file, which is Libya, and Cairo has just hosted this Libyan conference on its land. And as we understood that this, of course, meeting was attended by the foreign minister, by some intelligence figures, even the chief of staff or the army chief of staff, Mahmoud Hijazi, of course, with different representatives and officials from Libyan different factions. What came out was 5 points. But those 5 points really, we don't know if they really match or they are similar to those that were taken in Al-Sukhayrat. Do they match with the agreement that was really made in Sukhayrat, signed between Libyan factions? How do you read this agreement that was made here?
Well, I think it's very important. These meetings are very important that was held in Egypt, and it gives a hint about how the Egyptian position are going to push forward in the coming few months concerning Libya. There will be, I think, a visit of a military, maybe some military people, Libyan military people coming to, delegation coming to Cairo very soon, I think. And of course, it is obvious that Egypt is standing behind Haftar, standing behind military actions, trying to control back some of the problems or some of the parts that have problems in Libya, especially in the eastern part, which is on our border. There is still problems concerning ISIS in Libya because ISIS is controlling a lot of places in Trablus, in other places, especially in the western part. A lot of militias actually are controlling a lot of places actually in Libya. Libya is divided on the ground, unfortunately. The only hope for Libya is to have a strong military actions against all of this and try to reunite Libya again. The Sughairat agreement was very important at its time, but now time have passed, a lot of changes have happened on the ground. Haftar and the military, the Libyan military are being more stronger, more controlling a lot of places actually now. So it's very important to try to change some of the Sughairat agreement concerning what the changes that happened on the ground actually. So those negotiations in Cairo is important to try to reach a solution how we can go forward to try to control some of the parts of Libya in a way that people, Libyan people can be safe in those parts actually.
So if I may just discuss with you briefly the proposed amendments to this agreement, and first amend representation inside the Libyan National Dialogue Commission in a way that balances all national factions in the country. This is the first amendment that they need. The second one is to amend the authorities, and I guess we have to take attention to this particular article, amend the authorities of the Libyan Army Chief Commander, outlined in the 8th article of the 2015 agreement, the Sughairat agreement. Third, guarantee the independence of the Libyan army as a non-partisan, non-political force in the country. Fourth, reform the Libyan State Council to include members of the Libyan General National Congress, a legislative body elected to a 2-year mandate in 2012. I guess they're speaking here about the parliament, right? And replaced by Libya's current House of Representatives in August 2014, the parliament. Fifth, restructure the Libyan Presidential Council and its system of decision making. How do you view, or how do you read the 5 articles here?
Well, they are important. Those meetings are going to happen again, actually. They are not going just this meeting and that's it. They are going to be other meetings, actually, in the coming few months. The point is they are trying to give a green light to the military so that they are not controlled by any political faction. So this is very important, because if you just look about what's happening with the military operations lately, you will see that they are going forwards and sometimes they are pressured actually outside, criticized outside because of their operations trying to control more parts of the Libyan land. So they need to have an agreement by the Libyans themselves to give the green light for the military and to Haftar to try to make more operations without being actually criticized, as they are more actually on the behalf of some political factions and against some others. They are trying to say, no, the military is free from all of these discussions. The military is going to try to control more lands to make Libya more safe for more Libyans, actually, and against Daesh, and they are combating Daesh and combating militias that are making sometimes terrorist acts, actually, inside Libya, or actually getting on the borders to Egypt or to Tunisia and Algeria and trying to make terrorist acts inside. So it's actually, if we can say, some people think the situation in Libya is a bit vague concerning what's happening. But I think, in my own perspective, that situation in Libya is easier to solve, actually, than the situation in Syria or in Iraq, for instance. This is my own perspective.
So we have 3 important institutions that we're dealing with right now. We're speaking about the Libyan State Council, that is supposed to be including all the Libyan factions. We have the Libyan House of Representatives, which is the parliament, and we have the Libyan army that is represented so far by General Haftar, right? Because it's the only army that is really consolidating its position in, and able to control. we have those three entities in Libya. How do you view relations between the three entities here, and how will this formalize the upcoming stage or shape up Libya's future or the situation in Libya?
Well, unfortunately, there are problems between the three factions, actually. The parliament have its own point of view. The military has its own point of view. The presidential council, I think, is more pro Haftar than against him. A lot of actually different views inside even the parliament, inside the presidential council, not inside the military, of course. The problem is, what is the main aim of every part of those assemblies, actually, and military? What is the main aim? What is the main interest to everyone? Some think that the main aim of the parliament is to prevent Haftar, for instance, from controlling more, because they are pro some Muslim radicalist fractions. Some think that Haftar is not doing a very good homework concerning military actions, and he is not the right man. Something so. The presidential council actually, unfortunately, doesn't have a very strong members concerning the tribes in Libya, because Libya doesn't have Sunni and Shia, Coptic and Muslims problems. They have the tribes problem. Different tribes, actually. Some of them are very strong, some are not so strong, but still they have these problems between each tribe and the other. You'll find some tribes who are very pro-Egypt, some are pro-Algeria, some others are pro themselves. So this is the main problem now, trying to get those tribes together. Egypt have done a lot of homework in this, actually. We had a lot of meetings, conferences for 2 years concerning getting the leaders of those tribes to Egypt and try to get an agreement between them concerning what's going to happen in Libya. But unfortunately, not the very high leaders come to those conferences, maybe second or third leaders come, but attended those conferences, but still the negotiations between the tribes are going forward.
Yes. Please.
Please.
Indeed, the upcoming meetings would be in 2 weeks when,
Yes.
of course, the United Nations and, of course, those representatives go back to their to those who are superior to discuss with and come out with proposals. I guess we have to leave it here because our time is out.
Okay.
So, Mrs. Suzy Gnidi, always a pleasure having you.
Thank you, the pleasure was mine.
Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Al-Ahram Al-Arabi magazine. Thank you very much for
Thank
being
you,
with us.
dear. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, many thanks for watching. Next Saturday would be another Arab Affairs. Until then, it's goodbye.